Hello, welcome to yet another special presentation from the Cleanairbus production studio. Today, we will celebrate one of Latin America's most successful, most ambitious, most inspirational, and most duplicated bus rapid transit systems, the TransMilenio in Bogotá, Colombia. The system started in December of 2000 along Avenida Caracas and Calle 80. Since then, 12 distinct rapid bus corridors have been built across the city, from north to south, east to west, and to many neighborhoods in between. Let's get into it. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. First, let's have a brief discussion about bus rapid transit. Bus rapid transit, or BRT, is a bus-based mode of transportation that combines the flexibility and low capital cost of bus systems with the speed and capacity of rail systems. In much of the world, bus rapid transit is employed as whole transit systems or as a mode within a larger network. Others use the technology for a single line or a group of lines as part of a transit network. Most BRT systems incorporate 7 main features: dedicated bus-only lanes or rights-of-way to speed past traffic, off-board fare collection where fares are collected prior to boarding the actual bus itself, special branding to differentiate the BRT from a standard bus network, level boarding to allow all users, especially wheelchairs, to board with the floor of the bus level to the platform. Transit signal priority, which allows buses to change red lights to green or keep lights green to keep buses moving. High capacity buses to move more people within a given corridor. And high capacity stations and transfer points to accommodate high volumes of riders. With that said, let's take a look at the TransMilenio system of Bogotá, its history, the current network, and what the future holds for this system. Planning for TransMilenio started around 1997, which culminated into the system that opened just 3 years later. Before TransMilenio, actually going back decades, Bogotá once ran a large network of horse-drawn trams from as early as the 1880s and electrified tramways from the 1890s up until the early 1950s. The El Bogotazo riots of 1948, which were an uprising in response to the assassination of Colombian presidential candidate Jorge Eliezer Gaitan, destroyed much of Bogotá's Candelaria district, as well as several trams. Any trams that were not destroyed were operated up until at least 1951, when trolley buses were deemed a suitable replacement. Trolley buses from the old tramway company started running in 1948, running primarily through the Candelaria district to La Ortua. Once the trams were dismantled, used trolley buses from the United States and new trolley buses from Canada, Romania, and Russia were purchased to keep the former tram lines operational until 1991, when the trolleybus network under the EDTU was dismantled. Since then, many publicly run buses were deregulated, which meant that many private owners created companies to operate single or multiple lines to operate anywhere around the city that could possibly need a bus line. At one time, there were as many as 10,000 private buses operating on city streets all of which charge different fares based on demand and competition, which could often be very fierce. Bogotá was planning to build a subway network as far back as the 1940s, around the same time that the tram network was being dismantled in favor of trolleybuses. In the 1950s, the plans were shelved in favor of planning for a motorized bus network to complement the trolleybus system. Another attempt was made in the 80s and the 90s by creating a subway operating company, making legislative changes, and developing plans to actually build the line. However, due to the high construction costs amid a looming recession, the subway project was again shelved indefinitely. It was around this time that during the early part of his first term, Mayor Enrique Peñalosa developed a much more cost-effective plan for a citywide transportation network that wasn't nearly as expensive as a massive highway project or this new metro, but also solved the issue of the overabundance of unregulated buses, making transportation especially difficult. The system was modeled after Curitiba, Brazil's RIT network, which was first developed in the 1970s as an express network with bus lanes, but was then developed into a cohesive network with tube stations in the 1980s and the advent of larger buses added in the 1990s. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for staying with us. If you haven't done so already, check us out on other social media platforms. Let's get back to the video. Bogotá, the capital of Colombia and its largest city, is the third highest capital city in the world, behind La Paz, Bolivia, and Quito, Ecuador, and it's the third largest city in South America, behind Sao Paulo, Brazil, and Lima, Peru. Within city limits, the population is about 8 million people and 11 million people in the metropolitan area. Due to its high altitude, about 9,000 feet above sea level, air temperatures usually range from 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Bogotá uses bus rapid transit as a mode of transport that incorporates several features that allow buses to operate faster and without many of the obstacles that standard buses face. TransMilenio makes significant use of center-running bus lanes, taking the buses out of regular traffic and into essentially their own space. Many corridors have a single lane in each direction with double lanes at stations for passing buses, while some corridors have corridor-length double lanes for the purpose of buses passing each other and providing extra queuing capacity to pass through intersections. The buses have multiple wide doors for easier boarding and alighting. Note that some buses have as few as 2 sets of doors, while larger buses have as many as 7 sets of doors. Most buses have left side doors that are lined up with special boarding platforms at stations, specifically designed for 2 reasons: to allow for easier access to and from the buses, and to allow for fare collection to take place in the station rather than on the bus itself. Some buses even have doors on both sides, mainly for use on routes that both travel along the BRT corridors and make stops on city streets. Bus stops are spaced far apart to speed up the ride and provide regular stopping patterns. TransMilenio uses branded buses to distinguish them from other bus carriers in the city, including red for the main BRT corridors, which is the main focus of this video. TransMilenio has several types of buses in its network. The red buses are the primary buses in the network, serving all or most of the rapid bus corridors or troncales that connect many areas of the city. The green buses are your feeder buses or Alimentadores, which collect passengers from far out neighborhoods and bring them to the main transit centers at the ends of the corridors, called portales. As a side note, there are buses in other colors around the city, more associated with the Greater Integrated Public Transport System, which was created much later on to better provide a comprehensive public transportation network throughout the city and immediate suburbs. Blue buses are your Zonal buses, which traverse the city over multiple zones. Orange buses are your Complementario buses, which connect some urban areas directly with TransMilenio stations. Maroon buses are special services that may serve rural parts of the city, and yellow and light green buses are alternative fuel Zonal buses, generally yellow for CNG and light green for all electrics. TransMilenio's network of 12 rapid bus corridors reaches nearly every part of the city through neighborhoods such as Usaquén, San Cristobal, and Fontibon. Buses make stops at approximately 140 specially designed stations across a 71-mile network, including 9 portales, which are generally located at the edges of the city. The red buses are the backbone of the TransMilenio network, some as short as 40 feet, with the majority of buses being articulated buses, which are 60 feet long, or even longer, up to 89 feet long. During my 2023 visit, the main bus models of choice were the bus car Urbanos Plus and the Marco Polo Gran Viale BRT. These buses are specially designed to berth at stations versus normal curbside bus stops, with the exception of the 40-foot dual buses, which have doors that can access both types of stops. Within the trunk network, there are essentially two types of services. You have what's called the Ruta Fácil, which loosely translates to easy route, which is like the local service along the corridors, and then you have different express services. The Ruta Fácil lines have single-digit route numbers from 1 through 8 and make all stops on the corridors that they travel on. In this example, Line 1 operates from Portal El Dorado to Universidades along the entire Calle 26 El Dorado corridor, making all station stops. Now in this example, Line 8 operates from Terminal to Guatoque Veraguas along the Alto Norte, Caracas, and NQS Central corridors, stopping at all available stops on its route. Now, with the express routes, it gets a little tricky. All routes that bypass stops have a letter followed by a double-digit number. Now, with the express routes, probably the most important detail as far as wayfinding is concerned is the letter before the number. The letter before the number tells you that the final stop on that route is a station or portal in that particular trunk line. In this example, the last stop on the B11 route is Portal Norte station in the B trunk, which is the Autopista Norte trunk. If you're at your destination and you want to go back to your origin, trace the route back toward the corridor in which you started. In this case, the route originated from Portal Sur in the G trunk, which is NQS Sur. And since the letter before the number refers to the trunk that it's terminating in, the return route would be the G11, since it will eventually terminate at Portal Sur in the G trunk. With a few exceptions, the numbered portion of the route in one direction will be the same in the opposite direction. So, the B11 going towards Portal Norte will return as a G11 to Portal Sur. Most buses that travel down the trunk line travel down the entire corridor to the Portal. Some buses, though, only travel up to a certain point before turning back. On some trunk lines, the Portal is not even at the very end of the corridor, primarily due to the trunk line being extended in the past. Most routes operate on at least one trunk line, though some lines deviate from the corridors to connect other major areas to the TransMilenio network. This is where the dual buses come in. These 40-foot buses have doors on the left side for stopping at trunk line stations and doors on the right side for stopping at street-level bus stops. These are the only TransMilenio trunk buses that can pick up on the street. You could differentiate them by the presence of silver on them, compared to just red or red and yellow on the rest of the trunk fleet. There is one corridor that primarily operates dual buses, Carrera Septima. Some lines terminate along Carrera Septima, while other lines use the corridor to traverse the city. While the Ruta Fácil routes run 7 days a week, service hours differ for the express routes. Most of these routes operate daily, but some routes stop running on Saturdays and or Sundays. And there are some routes that only run during one or both peak hour periods. So it's important to know which route to take and when it runs. If all else fails, take a Ruta Fácil. Next year, the Cleanairbus production studio celebrates 20 years on YouTube. With over 500 videos, 4,000 subscribers, and content from 30 US states and across 4 continents. This channel is home to mass transit sights, sounds, history, and its future. Now, let's talk a bit about the trunk lines, shall we? All 12 of them. The Avenida Caracas corridor is the first built of the 12, with 14 stations along 5 miles of double-laned right-of-way in each direction, one of the highest capacity corridors in the city. Fun fact, Caracas Avenue had a bus-only corridor since 1989, but due to urban decay, the corridor was unsuccessful. The Norte corridor is a 6.4-mile corridor with 17 stations in the median of the Autopista Norte arterial road, which has no flat intersections like Caracas, making it a very fast and higher capacity corridor. The Suba corridor has 14 stations along its 8-mile corridor length, with few street intersections and very hilly terrain, giving great views of the city. The Calle 80 corridor is a 6.2-mile long corridor with 14 stations, primarily with double-laned right-of-way similar to Caracas. The NQS Central corridor is the central part of the NQS arterial, of which the Norte corridor runs along the northern section through the city. The corridor is 7.7 miles long with 13 stations, including a section of 6th Street with 2 stations. The arterial portion of the corridor has very few intersections and a single lane in each direction with passing lanes at stations. The Americas corridor is the longest of the trunks at slightly over 8 miles and growing, with 5 new stations to be added to the network in the coming months. The NQS Sur corridor continues along a portion of the NQS arterial with 7.8 miles of double dedicated lanes per direction and 17 stations. This is the only corridor that exits the city, with the most recent extension into Soacha. The Caracas Sur corridor is similar to Caracas for much of its length, about 7.3 miles with 17 stations. This is the only corridor with two branches, one to Usme and one to Tunal. The Tunal branch connects with the TransMiCable aerial cable car line to Ciudad Bolivar. The Eje Ambiental corridor is a mile-long bus-only street in the Candelaria district, the only corridor that has a street all to itself. There are only 3 stations here connecting other trunk lines to major tourist destinations, including the Gold Museum. The El Dorado corridor is 7.5 miles long with 13 stations. The western half of the corridor has single lanes with passing lanes at stations, while the eastern half has double lanes with many cross-street intersections. This corridor is well known for its robust bike lane infrastructure and its connection to the airport. The 4.5 mile long July 20th corridor has 10 stations along 10th Avenue, connecting the Candelaria district with San Cristobal. The corridor is designed similar to Caracas except for the interchange at Bicentenario, which is partially built below an intersection. 7th Avenue is a wide boulevard with one station but several dozen street-side bus stops along 5 miles of the thoroughfare. Museo Nacional is the only station associated with this corridor and the system's only underground station. With all of the history, fleet makeup, network structure, technology, and the likes, I want to take some time in this video to talk about what I really like and flat out dislike about the system. If we're being honest, there's a lot to like and quite a bit to dislike. If we're going to celebrate TransMilenio, we have to talk about the ups and the downs. I want to talk about the system as a casual observer, as a transit worker, and as a transit enthusiast. To be clear, when I'm speaking on the system, I want to touch on strictly TransMilenio and not about the SITP, which integrates everything. My experiences with the TransMilenio have been mainly on the trunk buses. I stayed at a hotel near the airport that just so happens to be right by the nearest Portal station. Some of the hotels in the area are more accessible via the feeder buses or the dual buses. The K corridor ends about a mile or two short of the airport property, so the dual bus K86-M86 and the feeder route 16-14 would have been the main ways to get to the K corridor and beyond. TransMilenio's dedicated lanes are quite the spectacle, especially in corridors where they double up so that buses can pass each other and make turns so that they don't cause backups, even though they do happen in some spots. But that's only because of the sheer volume of buses. Avenida Jimenez was good for that. The intersection of Avenida Jimenez and Avenida Caracas was, based on my observations, like the nexus of the network. Buses from nearly every other trunk line came through here. The Ruta Fácil buses run all day, every day. So do many of the express buses. Though there are some buses that only run during weekdays or peak periods only, the majority of express services run for much of the TransMilenio hours of operation, roughly 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. Fares on TransMilenio are fairly cheap, at just 3,200 Colombian pesos, payable through the Tu Llave smart card, which translates to your key, and it allows for a trip anywhere on the trunk lines for just over 2 hours, with transfers between Zonal lines and trunk lines, or a trip from a feeder to a trunk to a feeder line. TransMilenio started out with just articulated buses to transport thousands upon thousands of people throughout all the different neighborhoods. The system got way overcrowded very early on and eventually became the victim of its own success. It wasn't until many years later that bi-articulated buses were introduced to carry more people and reduce the over-reliance of standard articulated buses. Remember, this is all before funds were allocated to building a metro. The fact that they built 71 miles of bus corridors over 25 years, spread out to many neighborhoods that would otherwise contribute to congestion on the roads, is impressive to say the least. Some cities of similar size don't even have this much network in their subway systems. Food for thought. So, remember when I said that the system became a victim of its own success? Or that the system got way overcrowded early on? Well, aside from COVID, the TransMilenio is way overcrowded. All day. Practically every day.
Oh my God!
Buses come as frequently as every 5 minutes and still overcrowded.
Oh no!
About 2/3 of the fleet with bi-articulated buses, still overcrowded. Maybe time for a metro, perhaps? And this is after years of fare hike protests that led to the surge in car and motorcycle sales almost to pre-TransMilenio levels. Adding more buses has helped, but not enough. Keep in mind that this is a system that's supposed to adequately serve a city of almost 8 million people. Some stations have as little as 4 platforms or vagones, while some have as many as 12. With some stations, the signage is above the doorway of the wagon that the bus will stop at, and only those buses will stop at that platform. The signage is clear, but not as plentiful to direct you to the correct platform. This can be especially frustrating at the larger stations like Ricaurte, a transfer station between the E and F trunks. Knowing which trunk your bus is on is the easy part. Finding the right platform is more difficult and should be easier than it is. This has been a problem for quite some time, and TransMilenio has been under fire due to poor quality concrete road surfaces for these frequent heavy buses. It still is an issue, as shown in these videos, but the quality of the concrete was far more questionable years ago. Putting down asphalt would have been far cheaper and far less disruptive, but would be cumbersome to maintain with the sheer volume of buses. TransMilenio is a relatively safe transport option if you're looking to save some money and not have to haggle a taxi fare. With that said, pickpocketing is a major concern, even with security cameras and federal police patrolling the system. My hotel concierge actually warned me about using the system due to such petty crimes, but with extra precautions taken, such as heightened situational awareness, I was able to navigate the system with no issues. As with any big city or busy transit system, you must always keep valuables tucked away, plan your trip before you travel, and keep your head on a swivel. Even if you don't know the language, if you're an active victim of pickpocketing, make some noise so that the attention scares the thieves away. Sexual harassment occurs every so often in the network. However, unlike peer cities like Mexico City, who institute female segregation measures to mitigate harassment, Bogotá has no such measures. Finally, in areas such as along Avenida Caracas and Avenida Suba, poorer neighborhoods have been pegged with higher rates of robbery, even in the Candelaria district downtown. Though some neighborhoods appear to have more crime, the rates may vary. always be safe and alert. So, remember when I described the express buses as tricky? Or when I had you pause the video at any time to grasp the explanation to the express routes? Or even how easy it was to understand the easy routes, the ruta fácil routes? Well, this is what I meant. Not all express routes skip the same stops, and even when it appears that they do, further down the trunk line, they skip different sets of stops. This applies to practically every corridor, even those like the B trunk where not all buses travel to the end. I'm going to leave this up for a bit. I only mentioned express buses operating towards Portal El Dorado to make it simple. Imagine every corridor with routes that stop in all different places and not a single stop outside of the portales where all routes stop. Some routes skip one stop, others skip 12. And some even bypass entire corridors, like the B46 G46 combo, a peak hour route with no stops on the E trunk at all. Even though the stopping patterns are inconsistent across the network, all buses on one route make its designated stops. No short turns, no variations during peak hours, with the exception of certain days when Ciclovia Bogotá takes place. The Cleanairbus production studio would like to know your thoughts on the YouTube channel, on the official Instagram page, and even on Patreon. What city should I visit next? What topic should I cover? Want to see more of a particular video type? Let me know. Also, check out some of my other projects. Bogotá is a massive city with almost 8 million people, and they all need to get around the city. Some have cars, others have bikes and scooters, and everyone else has TransMilenio. But TransMilenio, if we're being honest, doesn't do the perfect job in transporting a whole city to every nook and cranny, but it does come quite close. With 12 bus corridors and over 2,000 buses, more if you count feeders and other connector buses, at least 2 million people a day depend on it, from Usaquén to Fontibón, San Cristobal to Suba, and Bosa to Engativá. If we're being truly honest, the real solution is an underground or elevated metro system, keeping the vast majority of people off the streets and into a high-capacity mode of transport. But being that a subway system, let alone a single subway line, can be quite costly, the decision was made to invest in TransMilenio as a cheaper option that is touted as much less costly to build than a rail system and moves the same amount of people, if not more. They were sold a dream with today's money until subway money comes along tomorrow, which it did. Bogotá is building their first metro line in what is envisioned to be a 3-line rapid transit network that will cover much of the city that is either underserved or served by a trunk line that is oversaturated. The first line, built by a Chinese consortium, should open in 2028. The rest of the lines, to be determined. But with TransMilenio coming in at an average of $73 million per mile, it's still a bargain compared to most subway systems in more developed countries. Heck, it's still a bargain compared to peer systems within South America. Granted, the subway won't be able to reach every part of Bogotá, but the metro, along with TransMilenio, will transform the way the city moves around, the way the city functions, and the overall character of the city. TransMilenio is more of a system that probably should have, at the very least, serve as the blueprint of a metro that can be wholly or partially built in its place at a later date. Any extremely heavy trunks could potentially serve as data collection for mapping out a replacement metro line or system, and the light to moderate trunks can absorb the buses and routes to provide alternate or new services and even serve new areas that have no rapid transit service. But for what it's worth, it's a great system as far as moving people rapidly around the city. Its trunk buses carry up to about 300 passengers on its largest models. The entry doors are on the left side of the bus to line up with station structures that remind me of subway stations with platform screen doors, but are on the street like some light rail systems. Boarding these buses is very similar to boarding a rail vehicle, and although buses will never fully replicate subway services, this felt like a stepping stone towards building the rail service that one day many Latin American cities can afford to build. The service patterns are quite plentiful and daunting compared to a city like Mexico City, but the level of service reminded me a bit of Ottawa's Transitway, where during peak hours, one station can be served by up to 40 different bus routes. Stations here vary from a simple 2-platform setup to a more complicated 6-platform setup like a major transfer point, to a Portal with separate platforms for trunk and feeder buses that function like terminal subway stations like Finch in Toronto. Bogotá apparently utilized a 1970s era concept and scaled it up as best as possible to combat the needs of a city that was choked in traffic and organized chaos, but needed a quick solution. 25 years later, the system is set to evolve again with a metro that could potentially redesign the TransMilenio network and by default the entire city. Happy anniversary, TransMilenio! Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Check back for new content on Tuesdays and Fridays. The Cleanairbus Production Studio, showcasing mass transit.